Critical Blast, where pop culture gets blasted.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com, where pop culture gets blasted, and also what we might call a lesser-known podcasting station. And it's perfect because we're going to be talking comics as we usually do, but tonight we're going to be talking with Mark from Lesser Known Comics. Mark, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, RJ. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Glad to do it. Always glad to have new guests come on the show and learn more about other people's comics. Now, the obvious question has to be, why set the bar so low? It's a bit of a self-deprecating title, isn't it?
A little bit. It's actually borrowed from a friend. He has a design company called Lesser Known Designs, but we've always wanted to work together. I said, hey, I want to start this comic book company, and I know at some point we're going to work together. Do you mind if I use that name? And he said, absolutely. So hopefully one day, we're just two sides of the same coin, but him doing more of just the art and me doing the comics.
An umbrella company, if you will, one over the other. That makes sense. All right. BAP is in the chat. Welcome, BAP, too. We're talking with Lesser Known Comics, and there is no crowdfunding going on at this moment.
No, there's not.
So what are we going to tease viewers with, Mark?
Well, the first thing that so this whole year for us is going to be a tease, but in a good way where viewers and readers can get a lot of free content. So that website that you're showing right now, lesserknowncomics.com, you can go right there and you can get download the first 2 comics that we made for free. So no questions asked. And actually we'll be adding 5 more onto that by Cinco de Mayo, if nothing goes horribly wrong between now and then.
So if you are a digital only kind of person, this is a place you should be adding to your bookmark bar.
Absolutely. So, we decided to do that actually out of function of we are a company that if you asked me a year ago if I was going to start a comic book company, I would have no clue what you were talking about. I have been doing creative writing for quite a while, done some things in the music scene, and I wanted to make a graphic novel, and I was lucky enough to come across a really talented illustrator who said, oh, have you made a comic book before? I said, no. She said, well, then you're not going to make a graphic novel. Well, you're not going to make a good one, at least. So
have you ever walked before? Then you're not going to run the Boston Marathon.
So we came up with this idea of saying, you know what, let's make a bunch of minis together, with various artists over the next year. We'll get, we'll give them away digitally for free and as many physical copies as away for free. She kind of helped me. Her name's Katie Drinkwine, and she kind of helped me put together this idea that, hey, we're going to put out all these mini comics for free, and it's also going to give us a chance to go through the process of going from storyboard to sketches to inking to learning everything there is about the trade. Because it's a lot easier to correct a 5-page comic or a 9-page comic than a 32-page comic when you realize you've made a colossal mistake.
Exactly. So in jumping into creating comics from nothing, I mean, for the first time, you're not a graduate of the Kubert School. What did you look at to teach yourself this is the way I want to do it? I mean, did you have samples that you were following formats of? Did you have the Scott McCloud books out and studying those?
So the first biggest shout out I have to give out to is Scott Circlin from Circworks. If you just Google how to make comics or making comics or making comics 101, he's got a whole YouTube series on every, he takes you flash to bang from, how to start putting together a plot. And then he has bonus, and all the way through, production and marketing. And then he has bonus episodes. I think it comes out to 70, 71 episodes or something like that. Wow. So yeah, if you just Google Making Comics 101, Scott Circlin or Circworks, it should come up pretty quickly. And so I watched all 71 videos.
That's like 3 college credit hours.
Yeah. And then I emailed him and I said, hey, I want to make comics and I don't want to be terrible at it. Can you help me out? And he said, hey, I kind of wanted to put a different layer on my Patreon page that's kind of, for that purpose, right? Where people who've, need a little extra help. And that relationship's just been so fun. And I meet with him once a month, and he tells me all the things that I would know if I had that, industry experience that he's coming from. So, it's just been such a positive relationship. So yeah, I could not recommend just that person, Scott Circlin, not just as an advisor, but just as a human.
Well, that sounds good. That he's a guy who should get more exposure then. And I will definitely look that up after this. And I'll probably even link him in the description of the video afterwards. Because I would like to make a comic someday, but I can't draw stick figures. So, I'm waiting till I bump into the right artist who is dumb enough to go halvesies with me. And any of them that'll watch this stream won't do that now. So, but yeah, that's the trick though. I mean, especially if you go into crowdfunding, the artist has to be paid up front. So,
yeah. So,
bit of a challenge.
So, on that topic, that's kind of how we evolved from, hey, we're going to make some comic books to make a company. When I was talking to these artists, I was kind of blown away. I don't think it's any surprise to your listeners or you, what conditions are kind of like for artists out there. But it was so heartbreaking to kind of hear like, oh yeah, even if you do all the right things, and you bust your tail and you get, what you think is going to be your dream job, you may end up at a company that, you're only as good as what you've done for them lately. And that was just so heartbreaking to hear. And I said, well, what if we try and make a company that, I don't know, maybe treats artists like humans.
Yeah. And if you're lucky, you'll be remembered by fans in your golden years when you have cancer and you need a GoFundMe because you don't have insurance.
Yeah, that's, so much struggles, we talked about things like the fact that, freelancers don't get vacations, these artists, and what that's like. And so we've built contracts with our artists, keeping all those things in mind. We're unique in the fact that I don't pay for pages and I don't pay for work. All our artists have a flat rate, and whether they produce no pages or 10 pages, they get paid the same, and they get honored on that original agreement. And the original agreement is really based on, I want you to make dope art, and whether it ends up being 3 pages or 4 pages in a lot of time, or you end up saying, hey, Mark, I'm sick of doing line work today. So instead I sketched this rad thing that we're going to use, that we could use as a design for like a sticker or an art print. That's the kind of relationship, because coming from the music industry, if someone said, oh, we're going to pay you per song, you'd make like 10 crappy songs or, 20 crappy songs. You never make a hit if you're getting paid per song.
So you're saying you're paying them per book, or you're paying them salary?
They're getting paid flat rate to do work, just art for a certain number of hours per. Well, so I leave it up to them if they say, hey, I'm going to divide it by, it's going to be 10 hours or I'm going to do 20 hours or whatever, because different artists have different pay rates. So we start small, saying like, hey, essentially give you a flat rate of $500 for the month. And whether you use, you can divide those hours however you want. And then we graduate that up, come seniority. So we have artists that are making, 3 or 4 times that on us, with us, just depending on how long they've been working with us.
So how do you come up with how do you come up with startup capital to do something like that? I mean, do you get an SBU loan or?
I lucked out. I happened to come across the capital from it's it was a series of very I never thought that that I would be put in this position. I grew up in a family that it was not uncommon for me to come home and the doors would be the locks on the doors would be changed because we were being evicted. You don't notice that thing when you're young, like you're like, oh, like everyone didn't live in an attic for like a certain period of their life. So I'm really surprised that, and I feel super blessed to have that startup capital. So, I could do it. I can make a company that does something boring, or I could do something that I can take, my kids to, like conventions and show them pictures on the wall, like I have behind me.
Yeah, if you're going to start your own business, by God, do something you enjoy doing.
Oh yeah, and my wife, she's I didn't know you were working because you've just been laughing inside the office all day, and I'm like, yeah, that's the point.
Yep.
So
do what you love. You'll never work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, we've had some initial success, and we've gained a lot of traction via social media quickly. And we had some opportunity to bring in some outside capital, but with that outside capital comes some outside opinions, and there's a lot of bad business practices out there, and not all of them are malicious. Some of them are just dumb. So, for example, we have a graphic designer on our team. She's finishing up college. And standard business advice would say, oh, you got a college student, treat them like an intern, keep a real tight leash and don't let them innovate too much, right? They'll get themselves in trouble. And we kind of took the opposite approach, and we said, hey, Jackie, just do whatever you think is the most cutting edge and most innovative and fun and stuff like that. And she's probably taken on 3 or 4 more job titles since she started, and she's, a rising star in our group just because she has access to, the academia there, where she can ask her. She's got a major in marketing and a minor in graphic design. So, we come up with an idea, and she said, well, I'll ask my professor about that. Well, that seems like a fantastic investment. We should not just treat you like an intern. We should treat you like
getting free advice.
Yeah.
you got a consultant on the side who's charging you no money. Not charging you any money. She's charging her money because she's paying the tuition.
Yeah.
So take advantage of that all the time. So you keep talking about the group. How big is your group here? How big is Lesser Known Comics?
It's 14 people total.
That's a good group.
It's not small, and I actually brought on one person. So I'm at former military, and I brought on another military person, former military person as well, because they said I need somebody to keep me from hiring people. This thing's getting out of control, and I'm spending money like a sailor on shore leave. So
so you brought in somebody higher ranking than you, right? So that you have to take orders.
Yeah, and actually, me and him worked together, and we applied for the same job, and he beat me for it. And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds about right. You should give him that job." That's so. Well, that's awesome. You need an adult in the room.
Yes, I hear you. So how many books have you made physically? I mean, what's selling right now? What's keeping the ship afloat?
So right now, we are. We're positioned to open up the Kickstarter. So we're doing Kickstarter essentially backwards. Some people do it kind of similarly, where we basically spent a bunch of money, and now we're going to do a Kickstarter to try and at least recoup some of those costs. But in the meantime, we're giving away the digital release of the comic for free, and then the Kickstarter will have these comics, and then advanced purchases of future comics and things like that, as part of the tiers. We're also doing some fun stuff for future comics. Like, someone floated the idea. They said, "Oh, maybe someone, that top tier you could pay to be featured in it." And I said, "Oh, well, if you're gonna be featured in our comic, I want to kill you off right away." So
Yeah.
then we started joking about, well, maybe you could pay for like a super exotic death or something like that in our comic. So we're messing around with tiers where, depending on how high that tier is, we'll give you just the rock star, way to go out if you want. But
the last thing you want is, 5 years later, you still got this background character running around, and suddenly he's like, "Yeah, my licensed image is being used quite a bit here."
Yeah, and the thing that I didn't intend, and this is the beauty of having such a large group is, people start joking around. They say, "Oh, well, I'll buy that tier because I want to put my friend in the comic just to kill him off," so yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of fun with that tier. And as the primary writer, I love getting a challenge on the writing, because I think comics is like doing Sudoku and writing a story at the same time. So not only do you have to have all the components there, but you got to put them, in the right places. So I love that.
And I love killing my friends in my writing too. Whenever I'm writing another Destroyer novel, I always make sure that chapter 1, whoever dies is somebody I know. And then I give them a book after. I'm like, "You want to read chapter 1 real carefully here." And they're always like, "Oh no, it's my turn, isn't it?"
Yeah.
So what kind of books do you make? What kind of books do you want to make? Because I'm not seeing a superhero genre here just right off the bat.
Right. And that's that. Yeah, it's kind of ironic because I grew up, like a lot of people, X-Men the animated series and Spider-Man the animated series in the 90s. You see that and you're like, "What is this?" Right? And then that like brings you into the whole comic book universe. And so I was a big superheroes person, but that was just didn't happen to be the stories that I wanted to write. I like Gang of Misfits type of thing. I like the fun, seedy underbelly. And I think what our style, because I do love, horror genres, but not horror genres that take themselves too seriously. So we're somewhere between like Pineapple Express meets Nightmare on Elm Street. So it's kind of action and fun, and also, some gore, but not for the sake of gore, but more for, if you could really kill somebody off in a fun way, then, that's a way to go.
Absolutely. I think somebody, whoever the writers were for the Saw series, had to have really had some behind the scenes fun, because if you've seen any of the Saw movies, the Goldbergian contraptions they go through to get somebody killed. So, the challenge is always to top yourself. It's like, what can we put them in this time that will,
Yeah, that's the fun part. I don't know where we landed on the theme of witchcraft, but our main character from our flagship, so I'll talk about, we're doing a series of lesser known comics, and it'll be lesser known 1, 2, 3, 4, and it'll get all the way up to 15 before we start taking the characters from those lesser known comics and having them have their own storyline. The main character within those lesser known comics is she's a Latina punk rock witch, bruja, and she's just classic California, whole, kind of scene. So she's the one with the Misfits shirt on that cover,
reflected in the eyeball of this giant beast.
Yeah. So that's the kind of story that I've been writing, and a lot of things are just based in the universe that she's kind of done. But we also have the Conjuri title, which was an unexpected acquisition, I guess, which Patrick Hickey Jr. He writes a lot of books about video games, and he approached me, said, "Hey, I have this story. I think it's really good. The art blew me away, like, right off the bat without reading the story. I had no intention of publishing other people's work. But I was just really impressed by.
But when good stuff shows up, better than to turn it away.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we picked that up, and I didn't plan for it, but it was such serendipitous occurrence. So they'll be releasing a new one every other month up till Halloween, and then we'll figure out how to do our regular delivery of those issues, after that.
Yeah,
I bring up Halloween a lot.
Go ahead.
I was saying, I bring up Halloween a lot because Halloween is where we plan to kind of make that our grand debut. Everything up until then will kind of be a soft launch, but we just figured, Halloween, we'll have all these stories kind of coalesce around like a fun Halloween special. Halloween's so fun on its own. We have this, so many artists that are going to make these stories that'll kind of collide, and we'll pull the universe together at that point. So all these short stories will come together. So that's our plan. Everything's right now is just leading up to our Halloween spooktacular.
The big convergence happens at Halloween. So yeah, I was going to say, I scrolled up an inch here, and suddenly these click to download buttons appeared. And El Crudo's in the chat. Hey, El Crudo, that's the El Crudo's got the orangutan with a machine gun in Vietnam.
Awesome.
Not to be confused with Machine Gun Orangutan, which came after El Crudo. El Crudo's the first. But these are available right now. If I were to click here, I could download both these books and just read them on my computer.
Absolutely. So, and then on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, we will have, there will be 5 more to go along with that are all free for download on lesserknowncomics.com. So in addition to that, we just sent to the printer, we sent both those comics to the printer, and we're going to be giving away physical copies for free. But I'm so glad we're doing this podcast, because I was actually listening to, and I'm going to butcher both their last names, but Michael Tierney and Peter Cimetti, that podcast you did with them, talking about it's a couple years old, but talking about the state of. A long time ago. Yeah. But I think a lot of the things they talked about are still very, very relevant. So, talking about the current state of the comic book industry. So we're printing out all these copies. We're doing a 2,000 copy print run. And we're doing that through Comics Wellspring, Greco Printing. I think a lot of people probably have heard of them, but nicest people in the world. And we're going to be making those comics available for pickup, at select comic book stores. So all you have to do is, any of those comic book stores that carry them, you go in, you read it, you like it, you tag it, in a social media post, and you can take it out the store. And
that's a cool idea. So you gotta, go to the cash register and say, scan it, type, put in the hashtag, show your camera, say, look, I did it, take your book.
Yeah, and tag that local comic book store too, as well. Because we want, to do everything we can to push traffic back into the local comic book stores.
Yeah.
We're taking a pledge right off the bat that says we would rather give you a free comic to pick up at a local comic book store than sell you one on Amazon. And that's just by virtue of, when the local comic book stores, suffer, the whole indie comic book scene suffers. Amazon's not going to do book signings. No, they're not going to. They're not going to support conventions. They're not going to support new artist release stuff. It's just, and that's not a knock at anybody who chooses to distribute through Amazon. It's a huge marketplace, and I get that. But we're all going to look up in 10 years and we're either going to be very upset or we're going to be very, proud of how we decided to maintain the craft and maintain the scene. So we want to set that as a precedent.
Well, the whole
for how we want to interact with local comic book stores.
The whole social media aspect of that distribution model, that's a very bad idea kind of thing. And I say bad idea in terms of the publisher bad idea and the weird things that they do with their books, like the last book they just did had a 24-hour sale date, and if you didn't buy it on that day, you couldn't buy it afterward. The shop had to return all the copies that were left over. So, and they've only got a limited number of shops. In fact, the first book they did, which 2 books ago now, the shop broke the rules and it put the books on eBay. And they're like, "Yep, you just sold your last bad idea comic. You are now out of the club." So they're pretty strict on their weird distribution rules, but it gets attention, and this is going to get attention. But Mark, they're digital downloads and they're free. Have you been to business school?
So
you want to get this whole profit cycle thing going at some point.
Yeah. So we did the numbers, and luckily, we do have a little brain trust of nerds, myself included, that said, okay, how long can we keep this afloat, and how much are we willing to spend on growing readership before we start trying to turn profit, on essentially hard merch. I see the indie comic book scene as being where the music scene was in about 2002 to 2005. And I just remember that because I was, sneaking into concerts that I wasn't, old enough or actually, no, they used to put the X's on the back of your hand so you couldn't drink. And then you go in the bathroom and you try and wash it off. What the music scene experienced then was there was too much music for free. And you had people like, Metallica, love them, but they just were whining about that cutting into their profit margins. But then you had this like indie punk scene of like Epitaph Records, and you had Hellcat Records, these like, these gutter punk labels that were just like, what we're just going to do? We're just going to give out a crap ton of those compilation CDs. And every kid who were going to the Vans Warped Tour had these. They, every single one of them had it, and they fell in love with, 6-7 bands, on these compilation records. And then the next year they were showing up to the same festival, same Vans Warped Tour, and they were buying a t-shirt. They were buying, the stickers, the patches, the this, the that. They've gone to 3 or 4 concerts between last thing. And that's what we're hoping to replicate, so,
the first taste is free.
Yeah. So I guess, I could compare it to, the drug trade, but I think
comics are an addiction. I have no. I had at least 300 kilos of stuff in the basement.
So that, I imagine at some point, we'll do some variant cover type things. We'll do some compilation or collection books that have like, multiple stories and whatnot. But we're going to try and continue to give as many comic books away for free as long as possible. And, that's, his name's Aaron that, is our business analyst. And we just argue all day long, hey, I'm going to give away this much. And he's like, Mark, okay. Then, but it's good, because we're able to do that and still be friends.
As a case study, I would, and I know I was kidding earlier about, making money, but as a real case study, for historical reference, I would look at, if I were you, the Mark Alessi and CrossGen, company that, sprang up in, I can't even remember what year it was. It was in the 2000s, early 2000s, because I interviewed him, and he put my interview in his PR package when he would mail things out. And then they went bankrupt 3 years later. Not because of my interview, hopefully not, but But yeah, he had a very unique take on doing the comic industry too. I mean, but if this was at a point where everything was being decentralized, folks were working all around the world, and scanning stuff in. He wanted everybody in Florida, right there in the office, like the old Marvel bullpen.
Mhm.
And he had never done comics before. He had these great series that were all different genres, different worlds, but had this real subtle thread of connectivity through all of them. There was always the same symbol showing up, and you never really got to figure out why that was. There was like this big, huge mystery going on in all the books, and we never got that resolved that I'm aware of. But
well, ours is kind of ours kind of similar with this. So the main character, her name's Daniela in our stories, and she's the one that pulls the rest of the characters and the rest of the story arcs together. So she's about 150 years old, or maybe a little older, because her origin story starts at the Mexican-American War, in California, and she holds her age well. Yeah, she's perpetually 28, which is what I want to aspire to be, and so she's lived this rich, storied life, where she's done everything from, raced, done race cars in like a Mad Max meets Speed Racer type of setting. She's done, she's essentially lived that, what is it? The, Banana Republic lifestyle in South America, doing illicit trade in the 80s, of whatnot. So it's her that's going to tie, and her experience is going to tie all these things together. And she's got a hapless sidekick that's loosely based on myself. That's just getting dragged through all this craziness and kind of suffering the consequences of her 150 years of bad decisions and impulse control failings.
You'd think she'd mature a little bit in 150 years. So you said that there were going to be like 5 more books on this website coming up here soon. Are they going to be like issues 2 through 6 of lesser known comics? Or are you?
It'll be 2 through if I could do math, 2 through 5, and then Conjuri. So this one was Conjuri 0. So Conjuri 1 will be the other one that'll be available for download.
Okay, and that not being related, can you tell us what that story is about? It looks a little John Wickish.
So it took me a second because I think when I talked to Patrick Hickey, the writer, Patrick Hickey Jr., he described it as a crime noir, and it very much has that feel and that style, but he had a really interesting take. And this main character, Conjuri, is essentially, the guy who's fallen through the cracks. He's living, like the homeless life, and he's eating donuts out of the dumpster from, behind Dunkin'. And it's a unique take on that crime fighting. It's almost like, that part of the population that's forgotten about, that's being victimized by crime, when they find him, who's this, on paper, that person that you're going to take advantage of, they find the wrong person. And that's the last mistake, these people who prey on the helpless will make. And I really loved that take. Patrick is got such a brilliant mind, and like many comic book fans, he's a fan of all the right things, like where like we talk pro wrestling and we talk music. We lost the whole afternoon talking Weird Al's movie UHF.
Oh yes.
So it just, when you have a writer that you admire and then is also just a pleasure to talk to, it makes life very easy. But the other title that we'll be releasing, and we're still working on the name, whether it's going to be called So I Worked at the Mall or So I Worked Retail, is another writer. Her name is Charlie. So we will be releasing titles that are very much in the opposite direction, where it's much more slice of life type of things, where it's about somebody who's working retail at the mall and all the crap that they have to deal with. So we got a nice spread, I guess, of styles there. I have so much fun talking to these writers and these artists, that it's we spend the Halloween stuff. That's probably the most recent example of the conversations where my wife comes in. She's like, "What the heck is so damn funny?" We said one of our Halloween ones, we're working on a black, white, and orange comic, where those are the only colors that are going to be in it. And we were going to do a take on Point Break, and where these kids were going to rob a candy store. And well, if they're going to dress up like the presidents, or the most recent presidents, and the only colors we're going to use are black, white, and orange. Like, we were just having such a good time coming
There's
up
only
with
one president's going to show up.
So, we just having such a great time writing that dialogue. So, but yeah, sorry, I'm probably rambling about how much I'm enjoying working with those writers.
Well, no, that just means you're having fun at your job. But you have mentioned you're going to do a Kickstarter in the upcoming time here. Do you have a launch date in mind? And what are you going to launch that you haven't already given away?
So on April 19th, and so the best way to follow us is Instagram. I can't do all the platforms because I'll lose my mind. So Instagram, if it's not on Instagram, we're not doing it.
You need to get a tweet deck. Get a tweet deck. Yeah. Or something. That way it's all in one suite, and then you don't have to use all the platforms. It'll just do it for you.
Right. Yeah. So it's easier to post the art, I think, to Instagram. But yeah, most of what we do gets reflected on Facebook and Twitter as well. But it's all derived from Instagram. But so the tiers kind of look like you can get physical versions of the two comics that are already on the website, as well as physical copies of the next 5. So you can kind of just get them all in one place. We're going to have some collector's editions versions of them with variant covers. We're going to have some art prints and original sketches and things like that available. Signed individual postcards from artists and writers. So those are the actual shipped items. And then we have all sorts of other things that you can purchase that are kind of more fun, where it's like what we talked about, like, oh, you want to be featured in a future comic down the line, like, yes. And depending on how much you want to go on that tier, you could either have a quick and personal death or a slow, painful, and torturous death in our comic. And that's just the fun kind of stuff.
I'm guessing you'll have things similar to what they did with rock bands. You'll have the stickers with the logo of the company name on it, the patches, the hat. Well, not necessarily hats, but patches and stickers good enough. Let people figure out what they want to put them on themselves.
Yeah. So because we do understand that, the comic is going to be, available for download for free. Some of those things, like the stickers and sketch cards, we're going to throw those in for free, just so, as a thank you that, we understand that, in all truth, a lot of people come to Kickstarter and they pay a little bit more than they would for something otherwise, because they just support the company or they support the artist or the writer. So we're going to try and make that, we're going to order in as big as bulk as possible, so we give people as much value as we can for demonstrating that support. Because we've just been blown away by, it's those little things, right? Where people say kind words in a message, or they just repost your stuff on on their account. Those things do mean a lot.
Now, the Kickstarter, I'm guessing, is just sort of a company launch thing, because you've already talked about how you want to get books into the retailers' hands and get people back into the LCS stores. What's the business model going forward? Is there like a Kickstarter version followed by a retail version, or is it just we're doing a Kickstarter to inject funds and then we're going to go to stores? And even beyond that, what is your distribution model? Because it doesn't look like you'll have a Diamond to fall back on here very soon.
Yeah, so I'm not in a rush to get into the distribution because it looks so messy right now. It's like, let's see how that food fight plays out. Yeah. And then again, we're not. We hope that we can get to where some of the more successful indie publishers are, but I think we're leaning more towards an alternative model where the comic book stores can order directly from us. We're working through the logistics of that, everything from, what does that relationship with us, look like, to making sure that there's advantageous returnability policies, and then all the things having to do with, maximizing down to, the ounce of, what do these boxes look like that we're going to ship and what's going to be in them. And, but we're also going to go out on the road starting 26 April. I have, we have our vaccines scheduled. So, okay. Myself and one other person, we're going to be going from comic book store to comic book store, first in the Great Lakes area, on the way to meet with the printers, so Ohio, Michigan, and,
it's a little road trip tour. You're going to map it out based on where the comic stores are.
Yeah. And we're just going to see how that goes. But I think, learning from the LCS folks, just out of their mouth, like, hey, how does a promotion work best for your store? And how is it not tedious for your employees, and how is it something that your employees are like, hey, like telling their friends about, and telling customers, because I'm sure there's promotions that, publishers think are a good idea for the comic book stores that end up being tedious or onerous, and there's second and third tier consequences that, can sour that relationship. And we want to make sure that, we're not doing that, and that we're taking the LCS voice, very seriously.
Sure. Well, you mentioned seeing an older stream of ours with Michael Tierney and Peter Cimetti. So you're aware then that we have a bi-weekly stream called the LCS Guys Show, where we have multiple local comic shop guys come on the show and talk about exactly that, as well as, whether or not Godzilla should have beat Kong, and how Diamond messed up their orders this week. But,
yeah, I thought, just so much of that stuff is, it's obvious once you hear it out of the mouth of a retailer, right?
Yeah.
That just because it's on, Diamond's number 1 list does not mean it's the number 1 thing selling here. But most of us even, don't really like realize that, right? And it's probably suffers from the same thing where like you see these like movie trailers and you're like, who sees these movies? Like
I think that every time the Oscars come around, I'm like, really? Did that even release? I never saw a trailer for that one at all. But yeah, and I actually talked with a PR person at Diamond two or more years ago when people were talking about the whole overshipping thing. And I did get confirmation that, these sales numbers, first of all, you're right that the sales numbers at Diamond reflect what books they sold to a retailer, not what books got into readers' hands. And second of all, what I got confirmed was that if they do double ship, if Marvel says, hey, if they ordered 5 copies of, Iceman, which was, I think, the title at the time, go ahead and send them 20, send them 4 times as much. And they had to pay the shipping, but that counted as sales. They counted those numbers as whatever ships is whatever sold.
Yeah, and
so they could sell 1 million if they wanted to give them all away.
Yeah, and I think with our initial promotion to try and get, boxes of comics to give away for free. So, the way I imagine it playing out is a local comic book store can, they want to attract customers to come in the door anyway, so, I don't mind if it's used as, hey, on our off day, our Tuesdays are our slowest day. So if you come in on a Tuesday, this is when we're going to use it. Or if they want to say, we have another deal that we're trying to push, and this comic would be potentially included, and we'll just meet their needs as best we can. But where we knew we had something with this idea is, when me and Aaron, our business analysts were talking about this, I said, what's the worst case scenario that could happen? And the worst case scenario that could happen is that I have a bunch of local comic book stores who are telling me to say, or calling me and saying, send us more comic books because we've given them all away and we have more customers that want them. That is the worst case scenario. Yeah, and I can go to an investor at that point. It costs me more money, but I can go to an investor and say, there's actual demand for this. There's a measurable demand for these comics. And then we can start planning, what we're going to do in 2-3 quarters from now, as a result. But until it's in the reader's hands, the cheapest thing that could happen is that people read it in the store and they say, this thing stinks and don't want it. And that's also a very important data point as well.
Well, the first Saturday in May is always Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah.
So you can, well, it might be too soon to target that now, though. That's just like, 2 weeks away now? 3 weeks away.
3 weeks, yeah. So, but every day is Free Comic Day on lesserknowncomics.com. So,
All right, it's gosh, there's so much to look forward to here, and I feel like I just walked up to the guy who was starting up the bulldozer to plow down a field to build a skyscraper. Yeah, it's a great skyscraper. I don't see it yet. Don't worry, it's coming. It's going to be here. I don't think I've talked with anybody doing a company at this ground floor development stage yet.
Well, I'm excited in that, and I'm also all ears. Lucked out to just other comic. One other big shout out, Sovereign Comics, Tyrone from Sovereign Comics. They're another indie comic book publisher. That dude takes my phone calls or my chat all day long, just asking the dumbest. I ask him the dumbest questions in the world. The most patient person, in humanity. Anything from like, hey, I'm trying to get this widget on my website to work, to like, are these colors like any good? Like, or am I doing this right? Or something like that.
Well, that's a cultural thing with the indie comics, is that they'll help each other out. Because they y'all realize that with indie comics, if the fewer indie comics are out there, the lesser draw there is to the shop to see your book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that being said, is we are all ears. So if if a local comic shop says hey, you should do this promotion, I would take that very, very serious. If there's a way they think I can, tweak this promotion for their particular market, absolutely, I'll be listening to that. One of the other things we do is I got to print in increments of 4 pages, right? So if you're an indie comic publisher and you want to put your ad or you want to put a short in the back of our comics, we're absolutely, like, why would I charge you for that? Put whatever ad you want, I take that really seriously. So, any listener, or retailer or comic book fan or comic book maker, that sees an opportunity to leverage the resources we're bringing to bear, to help them out, like, do not hesitate and, hit us up on contact at lesserknowncomics.com or reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram.
Well, yeah, and that's why I brought up the LCS Guy show to you, because I would love to have you as a guest with the retailers on one of our future upcoming shows here. Well, that's not redundant, is it? Future upcoming. Yeah, I don't think I could. I think I could have used either one of those words and been fine.
Yeah, I would absolutely love that, because I would love to Shark Tank those promotion ideas, because if they don't work for the retailers, I don't want to push them.
Exactly. Well, Mark, I don't know what more I could ask you about lesser known comics. Is there anything that I should have asked you? Something you were like, okay, I finally get to go out and tell people this. As soon as he asks me, I'm on it. And I didn't ask it because I'm not that business savvy.
Nothing I can really think about, except for just giving a big shout out to, it's a big company. It's 14 people. I think one of the other unique things about us is we have amazing women writer artists. We're a bilingual company or a multilingual company. So we put stuff out, and more stuff is coming out in foreign language. So, for example, lesser known comics #1 has some Spanish mixed into there. So we're doing a lot of stuff.
George, they do not sell digital only. They give away digital only. Go to the website in the link and download these 2 books for free, and then wait for the other free books that are coming. I have no idea how Mark's making money.
It's all an elaborate what is it, money laundering scheme.
It must be. It's a comic book laundering scheme.
Yeah. But yeah, ask those questions, and I appreciate that question. But yeah, so it's a big team, and just a lot of talent. So if you go on our Instagram, we tag all our artists and stuff like that, and reach out to them and ask them, what's it like being an artist, in this company, and see their other work. They do freelance work as well. And I just can't say too much. There's just so much nice things to say about all of them. They're great.
Okay, George is saying he wants the whole book. So let's be clear. When you click the download here, are you getting like the first 3 pages of the comic, or are you getting the whole issue?
No. So George, I'm not sure if you were on. We were discussing this part a bit. So we are gradually lengthening the stories as we. So these mini comics are basically a function of. Instead of us starting off with a super long graphic novel, we have chopped these stories up into small, kind of like Pulp Fiction style, world building. They serve as extended trailers for our full lengths that come out. On Cinco de Mayo, we'll have 5 more, and you'll get a bigger sense of what this universe entails and the kind of storylines and the characters and things like that. And then that's in May. So July, we will have 5 or 6 more. So, so we're just releasing them as we're producing them.
So when you do, though, have the full issue, something that you're going to put in a store, a standard comic book, 22, 24 pages, whatever it is, will you be selling digitals as well, like on Comixology or direct or whatever?
So we're wrestling with the Comixology part, just by virtue of like our no Amazon pledge. So right now, as you notice, these ones are just PDF download. So that's at least the way that we hope to deliver the digitals for now. So what a lot of these stories will end up being is we might reissue parts of those stories as attach that trailer to the storyline of a full 22 issue, so that when the reader picks that up, they don't have to know hey, which of these, minis that got made, in 2021, kind of helps me catch up with the story.
Gotcha.
Hopefully my writing's good enough that people can just jump in anywhere and enjoy the story. Because
you do have a lot. We have a lot of people who like the digital only. I like to have my hands on the pages. I'm agreeing with Stan Lee and boobs. It's they're nice to look at, but better in my hand.
Yeah.
So, but we have people who have to have it for space consideration, and they just can't carry their collection around with them. So I guess that's the real the more direct question is when Lesser Known Comics Volume 1 is in the retail store, is there a Lesser Known Comics Volume 1 PDF that can be bought from the website?
Yeah, so our plans right now is that the digitals will most likely be free through 2022. Because we understand that a lot of people who also read digitals decide to go and say, oh, you know, I do want the physical version as well.
I've done that.
Or I want, yeah, or and we add value to those by having things like you know, had to fill those 4 pages, right? So those additional 4 pages or whatever. So we reached out to some really talented webcomics. Alex Schumacher does Mr. Butter Chips. It's a smoking, drinking monkey that does social commentary. They're in the back of the physical version, but they're not in the digital version. There's Jeff Manley. He does a short called Riley, a teenage Bigfoot, and it's a teenage Bigfoot that, you know, takes too many mushrooms in the forest, you know. So that's also in the back of the physical. So there's value in the physical one that may not be in, you know, in the digital version, because we want to, you know, make sure that there's a little bit of a differentiation between there. And if somebody does pursue the physical one, that there's something a little more special about holding that in their hand.
Gotcha. But so George, yes, you will get the whole PDF at some point. Right now they're building it up. Yeah, and I've seen the books that you've bought for your house. When George buys a book, he buys a brick of a book. I mean, literally, it's a coffee table book in that if you put 4 legs under it, it's a new coffee table. He buys these oversized things that are just enormous, and then he makes oversized things as well. And that would be the plug for saying go check out Joe King Saving the World Again for the First Time on Indiegogo from George, but this is not George's show. So, but I'll plug him anyway because I like him. Mark, we have just about hit the hour mark here. So I don't know if there's anything more to say about Lesser Known Comics, but I appreciate you being on the show. I think it's an intriguing concept, and I wish you the best of success with it. I would really like to have you on the LCS Guys show sometime here in the upcoming month or two. Whenever there's, you know, an opportunity that aligns with your schedule, and you know, let you
absolutely. And on that road trip, and on that road trip too, we'll also we'll have a camera and audio and things like that. We plan a buddy from SiriusXM who's going to be doing some interviews on the road with those local comic book store owners, and
I was going to ask you, you're going to podcast
it. So we'll see how much trouble we get out on the road. You know, not as much as in our 20s because we're in our 30s, and you know, I go to bed at 8 every night. This is like a late night for me.
Well, I'm in my 50s and I'll be up till midnight, and I guarantee you can still get in trouble late at night when you're in your 50s. I don't know how I do it, but I manage somehow. So with that, thanks for coming on. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for watching. We never have a show unless you're here to watch it, and as always, we just hope you had a blast. So go check out the link in the description and find out more about Lesser Known Comics and make them more known.